I am really happy to be on this stage, and I'm thankful to Nikki and all the crew of Breaking Convention to set it up. It's an incredibly difficult and intense job to set up a conference, and this is really, really well done. So today I would like to talk about a story, which is the story of my first communities where I belonged, and I want to talk about something which is not specifically psychedelic per se, but has some psychedelic vibe and has more of an activist view on the scene of raves. So surely my ongoing career as a raver has been inspired by a narrative close to the cyberpunk and anarchist imaginary. And although in the last 10 years I've been contributing as a curator for many big festivals, psytrance festivals, especially of Zora and other smaller ones, I never lost my connection with the roots and never underestimated the importance of the free techno movement. And the importance of the free techno movement lays in a psychedelic renaissance and also as a precursor of contemporary festival culture in Europe, also on a political level, of course. So my nostalgic talk today will start with a jump in the past, because roots are important. So as punk finished with the letter K, techno movement starts with the letter K of Chaos and moves towards Kilowatt and Ketamine. So when I was a young punk, I visited a surreal and out-of-time village close to my hometown, a place called Mutonia. It's a permanent autonomous zone located near the river Marecchia in Sant'Arcangelo di Romagna in Italy. It's a Mad Max-styled community existing since 1990. I'm curious to know if any of you have ever been there. Okay. Just one. Okay, cool. So you should visit this place if you pass by that area. So I'm happy to talk about this place with you. After my first visit, I could not avoid going back to this place for many, many years, so many parties. And I keep hearing the stories of my friends, which were there since the very beginning, and they were talking about these incredible raves hosted, which were taking up for a week, lasting up to a week, where the main ingredients back then were art, tequila, and LSD. So now we used to gather still there for the 1st of May. We celebrate every year. But of course, the level of freedom has changed much, confronting the past. So the mutoids define themselves as someone which is living in a constant state of mutation. Their aesthetic is inspired by 2000 AD comics, and since the 80s, the mutoids spread in the world the ethics of their underground arts collective. They were created in West London in 1984 by Giorgia, a punk artist, and Robin Cook, a hippie mechanic. The mutoids use the waste of society as a material for their giant mutant machines and spectacular sculptures which were and still are staged in apocalyptic environments like squats, warehouse, theaters, and of course, raves. This style of the events proposed by the mutoids throughout the years can be considered as the archetype of free techno party, illegal, mainly with electronic tribal music, radical street art, surreal science fiction means of locomotion, techno-punks inspired costumes, and terrifying monsters spitting fire. In history, mutoids scenarios materialize also in other disparate geographic areas. As Giorgia said, it was a huge, absurd bit of anarchy, really. And in this picture, you can see an example of Tankhenge, which is a version of Stonehenge made with tanks. and a MiG-21 stalled from a Russian army camp. It was winter 1990, after the fall of Berlin Wall. Joe Rush, which is this guy here, with the other mutoids, grew up in England in a very specific countercultural context, which is Frestonia. I don't know if you are familiar with Frestonia here. Raise your hands, I'm curious. Okay, cool. Frestonia was the name adopted by the resident of Freston Road, a squatted area of London, also known as the Free and Independent Republic of Frestonia. This is also the place where The Clash recorded their legendary album Combat Rock in 1982. So various types of lifestyles merged within this tiny republic, from the excess of punk movement, the Apocalypse Hotel being favorite venue, to the surrealist nature of the Frestonian National Theatre. Some of the founding members of Frestonia were also involved in the writing of the Albion Free State Manifesto, which was issued in 1974. The text of the manifesto is included in a very rare book that you see in this slide, and it states, "The only state is your state of mind, and the only government is your body. The world is a common treasure house for all. Use your birth certificate as a credit card for free love, free shelter, free food, and freedom to do whatever doesn't infringe the freedom of others. Money is the meanest measurement of human energy there is." Of course, when we talk about how and why free techno movement originated as a counterculture in England and from there moved throughout Europe, we have also to mention their ancestors, which are, of course, the hippies. So the first free festival in the UK happened in Glastonbury in 1970. It was the day after Jimi Hendrix died, and the entrance fee was £1, including free milk from the farm which was hosting the event. In the 80s, another community of travelers was born where punk hippies and first ravers were starting to meet up. It is the famous Peace Convoy. The Peace Convoy was consisting of about 600 people, also named New Age travelers, who happened to be involved in the so-called Battle of Binfield in 1985. The Peace Convoy was traveling towards Stonehenge to set up the usual free festival, but encountered a police roadblock about 7 miles from the destination. Dozens of travelers were injured. Many more were eventually arrested, around 500, which results in one of the largest mass arrests of civilians in English legal history. We move now to 1988 with the second Summer of Love, a period of illegal parties on the notes of acid house and synthesizers, Roland 303 being the most famous one. But most of all, it is remembered as the moment in which a new substance literally invaded the dance floors and shaped dance culture as we know it today, which is, of course, ecstasy. Increased feelings of love and empathy on the dance floor, decrease of all sorts of violence. Partying becomes a medicine against social repression and alienation. So if mutoids were to become the artistic and aesthetic soul of the free techno movement, Spiral Tribe were to become the musical and spiritual epicenter of it. When, after the second Summer of Love, illegal rave seemed to be oscillating toward paid parties and clubs again, Spiral Tribe said, no way, it's gonna be in a warehouse, it's gonna be dirty, it's gonna be illegal, and it's gonna be faceless. They soon started throwing parties in the UK with their own sound system. They became particularly known in 1992 after Castle Morton Rave. Castle Morton Rave was a rave set up by Spiral Tribe, DIY, Circus Warp, and other sound system, and they created a temporary rave town entirely beyond the control of the authorities, a 5-day party for an estimated 5 to 50,000 attendees. Following Castelmorton, many of the tribe were arrested, their vehicles and sound system confiscated, and they were charged with conspiracy against the state. So the tribe was forced to leave the UK. They filled an old trailer with studio equipment, which became their legendary mobile studio, Studio 23, with resident producer Crystal Distortion and 69 dB, and created their own label, Network 23. So they began their exile in Paris, and in summer '93, together with other sound systems, put on the first Teknival. Take a look at the date, 23/7/93, because we're going to talk about it later. The exile kickstarted the blossoming of a huge, free, illegal technival scene across Western and Eastern Europe, which influenced the dance culture of more than a generation, including mine, of course. So I have the pleasure to know some of the founding members of the tribe, and whilst collaborating for new events and new projects, I'm conducting interviews around old school and newer generation techno ravers, so I will include some quotes in this talk. So first of all, for those who doesn't know the difference, I would like to talk about the difference between techno and techno. The pronunciation is the same, but it's actually the K is used to distinguish the underground scene from the commercial one. So the hardness of the K, beside of being part of the K reality tunnel, suggests a heavier and darker matrix. Techno is generally faster than the Chi techno. It was identified with hardcore techno at the very beginning, but then it moved to other subgenres. So techno is the sound of rebellion and revolution, as some ravers suggest. A curious anecdote, as you can see in the pictures, in the techno scene, the DJ is never playing on a stage, but is always playing behind the crowd dancing or behind the wall of speakers. This is because they want to keep the anonymity due to the illegal nature of the events, and also to send an important message, which is music and sound system is what matters. We are all equal. The DJ is not God. Techno is our religion. So the Teknival. The name Teknival comes from Debbie from Spiral Tribe. She told me that she got this name by mixing together the words carnival, techno, and festival. They wanted to differentiate their parties from the classical festivals, and also they wanted to let people understand they were gonna listen to techno music, and they were gonna enter into a space in which there is a high level of freedom, physical and mental freedom. So, as Peter Lambert-Wilson says, freedom is a psychokinetic skill, not an abstract noun, a process, not a state, a movement, not a form of governance. As most of you will maybe know, Hakim Bey, as Peter Lambert-Wilson, died 11 months ago, unfortunately. He spent last years of his life away from technology. It was possible to communicate with him only via written letters or cable phone. Wilson is a poet and anarchist, and of course writer. He is also very well known for his TAZ theory, the temporary autonomous zone, which was written from 1985 to 1990. Here, Wilson announced the telematic revolution of the new millennium, inspired the hacker and cyberpunk movement, prepared the way for the rave, and helped political reflection in a moment of radical change. I asked some of the founding members of the techno movement about Hakim Bey and the roles his theory had at the very beginning of the culture. It actually seems that ravers start reading his books quite later, around mid-90s. So at the very beginning, the foundations of the teknival was the inversion of usual schemes in dance scene, and also the idealistic creation of temporary chaotic realities. I quote Debbie here in our interview. She said, "It was because the ages had been so oppressive and so materialistic and so conformist, rave showed the pure chaos of the human experience. It was mind-blowing, and that's why the government cracked down on it, because it was dangerous to see. Suddenly everyone, black people, white people, rich and poor people, were dancing together under the same bloody sky in the same music." So in free techno parties, dancing becomes a political act, and traveling with tech gears, having the ability to set up a party in any given moment and in any given space is an act of independency. Defending the human right to party is a way to reaffirm individual and group freedom. It was and still is a form of hedonistic activism. All the scene is drawing from radical anarchist ideas and the urge for real experiential freedom, which is manifested through chaos. In effect, chaos is life. All mess, all riot of color, all protoplasmic urgency, all movement is chaos. From this point of view, order appears as death, cessation, crystallization, alien silence. There is also a specific number which is connected with the techno movement, and it's number 23. Number 23, and it was already, we met already before in the date of the first teknival. It was 23/7/93, actually 30 years from now, from this year. So, and this year is 2023, so 23 everywhere. Many ravers do say and identify 23 as the number of chaos, and as such is part of their spiritual belief. In Discordianism, 23 is the holy number and attribute to the goddess Ares, who surveys a world of chaos. Also, Robert Anton Wilson talks about number 23, referring to it as the 23 enigma or law of five. But how did 23 become so important in the scene? I have investigated it, and as they told me, it's coming from Mark Angelo, which is a founding member of Spiral Tribe. In fact, when they started put on raves, he kept seeing 23 everywhere, and also he was getting hypnotized by a fossil spiral he owns, and therefore the name Spiral Tribe. This psychedelic story on how the Spiral Tribe started is documented in a short documentary titled 23 Minutes Warning. So also Debbie said to me that 23 is the cosmic joke that chaos is playing on us. Jeff told me that a lot of people involved in taking psychedelics in their tribe read a lot of books by Robert Anton Wilson, probably also some of Crowley, and also important for the number 23 was Genesis P. Orridge with Psychic TV. In this album, in fact, you see the first song is Hymn 23. So in this merging of spiritual, rebellious, and anarcho-chaotic ideas of life, the life of ravers become a constant immersive journey towards cyberpunk utopian landscapes. And the lifestyle of choice capable of manifesting the ontological anarchy had to be a nomadic lifestyle. So I quote Jeff here. "I've been collecting vinyls for years, and we all decided to put our vinyls in a library and to give up all money and put everything to go for the sound system, the tracks, and our shared life. We were totally tribal. It was a proper community going on." So in the story of techno movement, there have been so many sound systems and crews gathered under the motto, the only good system is a sound system, and some of them were surely more radical than others. An interesting documentary titled The World Traveler Adventure, released in 2006, show how belonging to a nomadic tribe of techno pirates gave them the courage to do some really incredible missions traveling with sound systems in rather extreme situations, like after the war in Sarajevo, India, Africa, Mongolia, and China, bringing food and help to the people in trouble, and of course, music, all moving by land with big trucks and equipment on it. This was thanks to technology, and here we have the kilowatt. Kilowatt is a measure of how much power something needs to run, and it is surely used to specify the potency of a sound system. In recent years, teknivals have developed a more competitive attitude towards the amount of kilowatt each sound system owns, resulting sometimes in the creation of huge walls of speakers where there is surely an excess of decibels and sometimes a lack of creativity, maybe because the focus has been shifted too much on technology and too less on the power of radical art. This, of course, has a profound implication in all the debate concerning technology, ontological anarchy, and teknivals, of which I'm writing more on the paper about this talk. So, however, in its incarnation, teknival, it's a communal space of possibility that inspires a total experimental attitude, not just towards music and art production, but towards all areas of social integration. Kilowatts are needed to produce music, and music is really what matters here. Music and alterations of consciousness as being capable of creating that liminal trance state which rewires human brains and induce transformations. The sound system is the healer, the music is the healer, the revolution has to come from inside you. It's the change of consciousness. It's not to go out in the fields and take fuckload bad drugs. There needs to be a place for the free parties today. Yes, indeed, alterations of consciousness have been a major issue in teknival history, as consumption of mind-altering substances has always been massive. After a first idyllic, profoundly psychedelic time of foundation of the movement, the scene was dramatically overloaded by a quantity and variety of drugs, including the bad drugs. After all, the pirate ethos of the movement willingly accepted the flow of illegal goods from disparate parts of the world, becoming a very important vehicle of diffusion of most of them, both the good and the bad. Ravers coming from the eastern parts of Europe are telling that it was thanks to teknivals that they had the possibility to get in touch with drugs otherwise much more difficult to find, like LSD, DMT, MDMA, and of course, ketamine. Debbie told me that as far back as 1991, substances not yet known were talked about and started to be consumed at their parties. We were starting to hear rumors of this new drug called ketamine. Obviously, we couldn't wait to try. When it eventually arrived, I think it's about July or August 91 in England. It was from a lab in Switzerland, and it was fantastic. We absolutely loved it. Of course, ketamine is central to the techno scene for two main reasons. Firstly, because it was certainly in that context that the substance was primarily experimented and diffused for hedonistic and psychedelic purposes, finding very fertile ground. On the other hand, because it entails the whole essence of the paradox that characterized the use of substances with great psychedelic potentials for recreational purposes, the light and shade of alterations of consciousness. Of course, ketamine is a source of both healing and harm, integration and disintegration. As we all know, anything used and not abused can be useful. If it's abused, then it becomes a poison, and that's what happened to part of the techno movement, poisoned by addiction. This happened at the turn of the new millennium, coinciding with the movement's apotheosis. In fact, in that period, every weekend in France, Italy, Eastern Europe, thousands of people were regularly gathering for teknivals in squats, warehouses, or in the woods. 10 to 15,000 people every weekend would flock to Bologna Livello 57, me included, one of the scene highlight community center. But ravers were also aware of the risks of what they were actually proposing to the world, and they were working on it. So in 1996, the first harm reduction experiments started in Italy thanks to a collective called Lab 57. The main focus of Lab 57 has been doing drug checking during big raves and parties, setting up chill-out zone and promoting Europe's largest self-organized anti-prohibitionist street parades in Italy, mainly in Bologna, happening until about a decade ago. As the rest of the movement, also Lab 57 had a political view on the topic of harm reduction, so party substances were seen as a cultural phenomenon and not as a social problem. They were really aware of being part of an active and circular process of construction and social definition of drug consumption and safety. And as you may ask, what about today and what about the future? Where illegal raves are becoming more and more illegal, Italy being the last country to dramatically reinforce the penalty for anyone found to be organizing or participating in a not authorized party for more than 50 people, by putting up to 6 years imprisonment and confiscations of all the technical gear. So 3 teknivals are keeping on moving towards east, being Romania and Albania, the last 2 summer destinations. As raves are becoming more and more illegal, same happens for countercultures or any socially active non-mainstream movement promoting freedom of manifesting chaos. Internet censorship and always more efficient means of control are just an example of how easy it is nowadays to make something disappear. Not to mention the threats of artificial intelligence on our freedom as human beings. The World Free movement has been under attack by governments since the very beginning, but it is in this dichotomy of chaos against order that lies the spiritual and activist meaning of teknivals. And also the power of teknivals has been bringing the capacity and the knowledge to all Europe on how to set up a party, actually. So they were also the ancestors of what we now define as psychedelic parties, although they were more inspiring on the technical side. On the idealistic side, there was much a syncretic vibe, because of course psytrance is also coming from the Indian and from the hippies scene, as Chiara was telling before. So, as I view things after all the years of active participation in psytrance events and teknivals, the mainly capitalistic and pyramidal structure of most legal festivals nowadays do not permit the creation of permanent egalitarian scenarios, do not empower the permanent communitarian concepts. So surely, gives and provides a comfortable set and setting for psychedelic exploration. A lot today is ordered and commercialized chaos. That freedom that was once so important is secluded between the fancies of fees, entry fees, and security control. It seems like the majority believes hedonism and escapism will save us from our future. But is it really like that? What could bring back countercultural and activist instinct to all ravers and to our dance floor in a more consistent manner? Maybe a new substance? Maybe is it time to discover a new psychedelic? Or maybe we should just consume more of them in the proper set and setting? Well, I wish for a future with more communitas, more permanent autonomous zone where we all could find safe space to explore the magic of freedom, the magic of chaos, that deeply human creative instinct that makes us capable of manifesting profound changes in reality. I wish somehow we could evolve to a next level and mutate to survive. Thank you.